Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. This episode is powered by Dr. Ray Gorman, founder of Engage Movement. Learn how to boost your income without relying on sessions. Get a free training on the blended practice model by following at Ray Gorman DPT on Instagram. Joining me on the podcast today is Sam Cohen. Sam is a collegiate baseball player who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past, and it was great to get reconnected with him and share insights into his experiences within the sport of baseball, some of the obstacles he's overcome, how he's risen to the occasion, his overall mindset and mentality surrounding the sport and life and beyond. This was an amazing episode, and I know you're going to love it. Enjoy. Sam, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to see you again, man. And I just love all the success you have experienced over the last few years, man. It's just great to see you doing so well and everything. But for people who maybe don't know you as well that way, would you mind filling in a little bit about who you are, where you're at, and how you've gotten there?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on. It's been a while since we worked together back at True Sports. I don't know. I think I was a junior in high school or sophomore in high school back then with some arm issues. So, yeah, I really appreciate reconnecting and having me on. So, right now, I'm just graduated my junior year at Haverford College, where I'm a pitcher on the baseball team, Division III baseball. Also, computer science major, and I'm doing a 4-1 accelerated master's program at University of Pennsylvania, which is basically just earning a master's degree, kind of getting a start on a master's degree in computer science while I'm doing my undergraduate work. So spend a lot of time in Philly, both going to school and playing baseball.
There's so much to unpack about that kind of 30,000 foot overview that you just gave that way. Obviously, we met a few years back that way, and now you're in your junior year at Haverford, which is just absolutely insane for me to stop and think about how quick time goes. Like I feel like I'm getting old out here. My goodness, can't hang with the young guys anymore. But obviously, there's that whole process. First off, from going from that high school level to the college level and the jump and the leap that comes with that, but also the process of just getting recruited and getting looks from the universities that you're interested in, universities that have your academic programs that you're interested in, and then obviously the balancing act of making all of those things work that way. So I'm curious to hear more about what that process was like for you to jump from high school to college sport that way, and what did that recruiting process look like for you as well?
No, absolutely. So I definitely was not a highly recruited athlete out of high school, which definitely mean I had my work cut out for me in order to get recruited by good baseball program, but also had the academics I was looking for. And so there was a pretty kind of small set of schools that had Division III baseball, which is kind of the level that I knew at my current ability I was able to play, and good academics because that was more important to me and my family going into my college career was making sure I could come out with a good degree. And so I went to some showcases. I didn't get a ton of looks. I was just for, numbers, everything pitching is a lot of numbers. So my senior year of high school, I was probably 78 to 82 miles an hour, which, if you're in the baseball world, is not all that impressive, especially nowadays in the current era of velocity, especially when it comes to recruiting. So I definitely had my work cut out for me there. I went to a couple of showcases, both with schools and big showcases that have a lot of schools, some name brand showcases, and I got a couple of looks here and there, but nobody I was really excited about. And then I started working with a one of my friends recommended a recruiter that helped me reach out to schools, and so he kind of like did an eval on me and said, "Okay, well, I see there's potential. I think you'd be good for this school and that school." And one of my sister's friends actually had gone to Haverford, and so we're like, "Oh, that's a good academic school." And I've heard really good things about their baseball program and specifically their head coach. And so, we'll reach out through this kind of like friend of a friend recruiter who like sent an email for me and connected me with the head coach at Haverford, who's Dave Beccaria. And definitely from the first email I sent to Coach Beccaria at Haverford, I mean, I was pretty set. The school itself is a liberal arts school and it's pretty small, which is definitely not is not where I pictured myself. I pictured myself in more of a larger school. But talking to him and talking to some of the guys on the team, it seems like a really good fit. It seems like there's a really strong emphasis on balance, which I appreciated. There's as much time spent in the classroom as on the baseball field if you want to. And there's a large social component as well, having the whole team be very like tightly knit and the whole student athlete community really being very tightly knit at Haverford. So all of those things were really big like factors in my decision to go there. As well as obviously the player development. Coach B talked very strongly of the pitching program at Haverford, and at the time, my freshman year, it was Coach Oakley who Christopher Oakley, who he was great. He's no longer with the program, but he was really helpful for me in my personal development. So just like knowing that there was the resources there to get better as a pitcher, something I was really excited about because being a high school pitcher that, was not anywhere near what I knew was my ceiling in terms of physical performance, both in terms of velocity, but also mentality and just overall, what it means to be a pitcher. I was excited to go somewhere that I could figure out how good I could be in an environment that other things were important as well. I can still get a good degree that's well respected after I graduate, and all those things. So it was really a combination of the culture of Haverford and kind of the what it was able to provide me in terms of a degree and baseball development. But in terms of getting there, I was very lucky to connect with Coach B and kind of what I believe is maybe a little biased, but a unique program in a lot of ways. But yeah, I definitely had a unique recruiting process in that way.
Absolutely. And the more I talk with athletes, the more I realize there is not necessarily a like correct way to do the recruiting process. I think a lot of people think they go from high school right into their dream university, they play 4 or 5 years, and the rest is history. But I think now more than ever, we're seeing there's a lot of unorthodox ways to get there. And, sometimes that's the help of other people. Sometimes that's connection. Sometimes that's transfer portal. It looks different for everyone that way. And I think as long as you have your kind of founding principles of what you're looking for, kind of like you did, you knew what you were looking for going in. I think that makes that process a lot easier, right? You know what you're looking for. You just have to go about finding it. And it might come in the craziest place, right? Like you mentioned, you did not expect to be in a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, but here you are and you're absolutely crushing it. I think once you kind of know what you're looking for, it might look different or it might be in a different location than you initially expected it to, right? But what's on the other side of that package is exactly what you wanted. It's just wrapped differently, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people that I've talked to about Haverford, about small liberal arts colleges, are very quickly resistant. Oh, I don't want a small school. I want a big school. I like meeting people. And that was very much the same thing I said, and that was the same concern I brought to the coaches when they asked, what I thought of Haverford. But I think once I get there and I've met the people, and the second I stepped on campus, I had 35 best friends already set for me, and I like meeting people, but I'm still meeting people every day. But the people that I do know are people that are gonna be my lifelong friends, and I in that respect I really appreciate kind of quality over quantity. Not to say that I'm not still meeting new people, and have met a lot of people outside of the baseball team, but I think having a core group of guys that I'm really good friends with, I think you gotta go through the college experience with, I value much more over just having 40,000 random people around me, which is only something I realized kind of a year or two into my college career, but it's not super easy to explain to somebody that's looking at colleges.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, you also mentioned that you wanted to develop more as a pitcher and, what it means to be a pitcher that way. I'm sure everyone has seen the game of baseball, right? We're in America after all. It's the nation's pastime. However, I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what it takes and what it means to be a pitcher, the physical demands, but also I would even say the mental demands that go into the sport, right? I had a guy about a year and a half ago on the podcast, Tim Kelly, talking about his kind of college baseball career, and he got a case of what we call the yips, for lack of a better way to put it. And he was like, yeah, it made a major impact and kind of made me kind of detour from the plans a little bit, just from the mental side of it. And, even before that, I had a guy named Tony Abatini on the podcast, and he talked about this process of tunneling pitches and kind of, psychologically tricking batters to make every pitch look nearly identical the first 40 feet on the way to the plate that way. So I'm curious to hear more about kind of your side on the pitcher development side of things and some of those other roles like the mental and physical sides in that kind of pitching development process for you that way.
Yeah, and I can absolutely talk about kind of the tunneling and I mean, everybody's dealt with some version of the yips where you feel like you're standing in the middle of the field and maybe you just gave up a home run, maybe you just walked the last two guys and you feel like the world's coming down around you. And I think every pitcher's experienced that before. I'm happy to talk about like kind of dive into those things as well. But I think my greatest area of improvement and something that I feel like has had the most tangible impact on my performance has been kind of my process and my approach to throwing each pitch. Because for those that don't know, pitching is, I would say, in sports, the greatest example of your approach and your performance is not necessarily reflected in the results. And so as a pitcher, you can throw a pitch to the spot you were trying to throw it as hard as you wanted to throw it. And it could get hit for a home run, or the umpire cannot call it a strike, or they get hit a weak ground ball, and just by happenstance, your shortstop was, not in the right spot, and it's a single. And so for me, I think really separating myself from the results of my performance was an important factor in allowing myself to perform to the greatest ability. And so I find, at least in my own performance and from talking to a lot of other guys on the team, that you have a certain ceiling in terms of physical ability. I can throw my fastball at X mile per hour, and I can locate it X well, and I can throw however many different off speed pitches, and they move this much. But that's kind of like best case scenario. And the reality is you're very much hindered and limited by your mental ability to focus on doing each one of those things. And so the second something doesn't go your way and you're thinking about that while you should be thinking about throwing the next pitch, you very quickly start missing and you very quickly aren't, executing to the ability that's consistent with your potential. And so I think creating a mental process and having tools to reset after things go well and things don't go well has really allowed me to focus on executing each pitch individually and taking it one step at a time, so that no result that's out of my control is going to take away from my ability to execute to the highest degree possible. And again, that's much easier said than done. And so we're at Haverford really lucky to work with a great mental skills coach named Lauren Becker Rubin. She's been great. I've worked with her pretty closely, having like one-on-one conversations for basically since my freshman year. As soon as I was able to, Coach B puts a lot of emphasis on the mental game and kind of having a strong process that you can fall back on. And so we've done a lot of team conversations with her. But I found having one-on-one conversations with her where I'm like, hey, sometimes I go out on the mound and I don't feel like I'm going to do well. Like, why is that? Like, why are these kind of like feelings that I know aren't necessarily true creeping up, and how can I combat them? And she very much has emphasized working on the mental game as if it was, a muscle, right? Like you're not going to expect for your bench press to increase if you never work on it. You can't expect to feel more mentally fit on the mound and feel more confident if you haven't put the work in. And so over the last 3 years, I think that's been besides the obvious, you need the skill to be able to do any of these things. You need the raw ability. But given that, I put a lot of work in over the last 3 years to allow myself to perform to my highest potential via resetting when things don't go well, resetting when things do go well, and everything in between. And that extends to practices, that extends to your training, that extends to every facet of pitching. But just the nature of pitching, where you can do everything right and the result doesn't go your way, is a pretty hard hurdle for a lot of people to go over. And that is combined with the amount of pressure that is inherent in pitching, right? Like the game doesn't start until you do, and if things aren't going well, there's no passing the ball to another player, right? You can't just stand and wait there for your coach to warm someone else up, right? Like the next pitch only happens when you throw it, and so there's kind of extreme accountability and extreme exposure to your strengths and your weaknesses, because really the game is relying on you at any given moment.
Absolutely. And I think you have such a mature way of looking at it and going about the mental side of the game that way. And at least speaking about myself and kind of my own limited sports career that way, that was never really a strong suit for me in any of the sports that I played that way. I feel like the mental side was always a weak spot for me, especially in high school that way. So it takes a little bit of maturing as a person to realize how important that is to your game and to have the conversations to improve it that way. Was there like an aha moment that came about for you that made you realize the importance of the mental side of the game and kind of created that desire to improve the mental side? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think as much I think there were a lot of small aha moments rather than one. I think just having conversations with our mental skills coach where she would start probing and ask questions to me. And I think I know myself as a very logical kind of, logic driven person. I don't get very emotional on the mound. And so when I came into college and I'm trying to be a better pitcher, I sometimes would deviate from who I really am. I would try to get myself amped up emotionally. I would try to do these different things that I saw worked for other people to be a good pitcher. I come off the mound, pumping my fist and yelling. Um, and she would ask me why I was doing that, why I would do those things, or you know, like what was the thought process behind them? I'm like, well, looks like other people do it. It looks like it works well for them, and it's you see on Instagram people doing that, and like, I think that makes sense, right? You're going into war, you're going into battle, and her perspective, that was a very aha moment to me. Is like that's not who you are. Like I'm a very like logical, level-headed person that I think performs best. I know performs best when I don't get too high or too low. And so an aha moment for me was really understanding who I was and the things I was able to control. I think when I was able to write down, okay, what pitch I throw, where I throw it, and with how much intent I throw it are the three things I can control. And obviously, fielding my position, my coach wanted me to mention that. Yeah, I can be a good defender, look at my middle infielders, see if I need to pick off, see if I need to, you know, hold a runner on better and on those things as well. But in terms of executing any one given pitch, there's three things I'm able to control. And if I do those things and the result doesn't go my way, then, so what? I did a good job. There's nothing I can do about that. And maybe you need to reassess after the game if you really chose the right pitch or you really executed in the right place. But especially given that our coaches tell us what pitch to throw now, it's really pretty simple for a pitcher. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. We have these little devices that relay the pitch to throw, and we wear them on our wrist like a watch. And so, I look down at my wrist, I see what pitch I need to throw, and then 110% of my effort should be put into executing that pitch right there. And if the game is tied in the bottom of the ninth, or it's the top of the first, or it's the bottom of the seventh, and we have a 12-run lead, that doesn't change. And I think kind of allowing myself to really hyper focus on the task at hand was a really like aha moment for me because it differentiated this like emotion spiral that sometimes I think all pitchers have found themselves in from what actually matters and what actually changes and what actually gets results. And so that was a big like realization for me. But that was the result of a lot of kind of like internal thought and a lot of experimentation and a lot of failure as well, and a lot of reflection after good outings and bad outings. And so just for example from this season, so we played McDaniel in our first opening doubleheader, and so I went in late in the second game. I came in a relief role, and I was feeling really good. My stuff was really good. My mental focus was really good. I was throwing into the I was in the let's see through seventh, eighth, and ninth, I think, or maybe the end of the sixth, seventh, eighth, and then ninth, or whatever it may be. I threw like 2 2/3 scoreless innings. I was cruising. I was feeling good. My off speed was landing. I was, sticking to my mental process. And then in the ninth inning, we had I think it was 2 outs. It was 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, and it was a tie game and I was feeling good. And so I just got the first two guys out and my mental process has been locked in, right? All I'm thinking about is what pitch I'm throwing, where I'm throwing it, how hard I'm throwing it. And then we get 2 outs and I'm like, sweet, I just got to execute one slider here. I got to throw one fastball here and the game will be going to the 10th inning. And we'll win the game, and this will be great. And I thought about that. I thought about that result. I thought about what was going to happen once I executed that slider a little bit too long, and I let that occupy more mind space than it should. And so that distracted me from getting ahead in the count. I was behind 2-0 on a guy, then maybe I gave a single or I walked him, and then I had a runner on for the first time all game. And suddenly I was thinking, oh crap, like, I have a runner on. And I'm not thinking about my three things: executing a pitch. And then I walk the next guy or give a base hit or whatever it may be, and they hit a walk off. And it was like, what happened? I felt great. I felt great physically, felt great mentally. And in post game reflection, it very much became obvious that because I was doing well, because I was so close to the end, I took my foot off the gas in terms of focus and my mental approach. And so that for me was a very eye-opening moment in terms of this is not something just to do when things aren't going well. It's not just a reset mechanism, but it's something to do when things are going well. And down the stretch of the season, that paid dividends. And as I was unhappy to lose that game, I think that was a very potent moment in my mind as an example of sticking to the process and sound like and be like trust the process. And that was a lesson learned to me. And then down the stretch, I faced them again in the playoffs, and I threw really well against them, and it was, I think, in no small part due to the lesson I learned from that game, which is no matter if it's bottom of the ninth tie game or top of the first, no outs, the approach is the same, and the way you go about throwing each pitch is the same. So that was a long-winded way of saying the aha moments have come in different ways, and to different degrees, but it's really mostly come in kind of post-game reflection, and often post-game reflection after failure.
Absolutely. It's having this relentless pursuit of your goals at all times that way. And to the point that you made, it's not something that you can let off of or kind of chill out when things get easy and comfortable. It's you have to stay on it at all times that way. But unfortunately, for the majority of us, at least, it sounds like for you and for myself as well, we learned that by coming up short in different moments, right? Failure becomes part of that recipe for success moving forward, right? We fall up short, we come up short on some kind of endeavor we have, and then we look back, we reflect on it, we learn from it, and we take those lessons and we move forward to higher ground. And I think that again, having that framework and having that process in place of being able to reflect on things, it's difficult to do, but being able to look at yourself in the mirror and be upfront and honest with, kind of where you were at and, what your performance was and what you can do different next time. I think that's the way to go about it, right? That's something we should all kind of strive to develop that way. How do we have this process of high respect for all those around us, including ourselves, but also a low enough ego to understand that, in any situation, even if we're so close to coming out with a win, we can still fall short and we can still blow it, right? So having that process of being able to self-reflect, being able to learn from the things that have occurred in your own experience that way, and then reflect on them. I mean, that's necessary for success in any endeavor. I don't care if it's sporting, business, entrepreneurship, being a physical therapist or a strength coach, whatever it is that way, you have to have that process of checks and balances, that process of evaluating what you're doing, the effect it's having, and making sure that you stay locked in. Because as you mentioned, the minute you start to lose focus is the minute that things can go wrong that way. And I think ultimately, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but one of the things people tell me a lot, especially athletes, is that they want happiness in a sport. They want happiness in their endeavors that way. And I think a lot of the times, and maybe this is getting too philosophical, but we tie happiness to a person or we tie happiness to things when in reality, at least for myself, I've found a lot more enjoyment out of tying happiness to a specific goal that I set. And maybe it's a physical performance oriented goal, maybe it's a mental goal, whatever it is, and just crushing whatever goal I set for myself, whatever that is. And again, any endeavor that way, I find a lot of enjoyment out of setting that goal and crushing it because if you tie it to other things, like if I tie it to a person, as you outlined, people let us down. I let myself down, in that situation where, unfortunately the other team hit the walk off on you after you did all the work to get there, you probably feel like you let yourself down. And that's okay. It's okay to come short. It's okay to fail. Again, failure is part of the recipe for success. But when we tie it to that goal, that specific thing that we're putting all of our time and effort and energy towards, personally, I feel a lot more enjoyment out of just, again, crushing and smashing that goal. And it also kind of helps me direct my energy. It's like, hey, I'm putting in the extra time, I'm putting in the effort, I'm putting in the reps and the sweat equity to accomplish this specific thing, as opposed to, well, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to pitch and just kind of, do my best. I don't have any kind of light at the end of the tunnel when I just feel like I'm going through the motions that way. Quick break, because if you're a rehab professional sick of burnout, this could be your answer. Engage Movement's blended practice model is a proven system built by Dr. Ray Gorman, a PT who walked away from the 55-hour-a-week grind and built a blended practice model that doubled his income while working less than 25 hours a week, and he didn't have to rely on the traditional way of selling sessions to do so. It's all about blending remote and in-person services, stacking monthly recurring revenue, and building a business that finally supports your life, not the other way around. This model isn't just theory. Real providers, including myself, are creating lives of freedom and flexibility without being tied to their schedule. And as a listener, you get free access to the complete training. DM my name, Dan, to @RayGormanDPT on Instagram and receive your free breakdown on the model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to add to that. I think when you mentioned finding enjoyment in crushing a goal, so for those that are unfamiliar, like pitching is extremely unique in that it's very difficult to train in an environment that closely reflects the pressure you'll be in a game. And so not only for physical reasons, right? So I started this season, and so that meant I would throw 100 or so pitches on, a Friday or a Saturday or a Tuesday or whatever it may be. And I didn't see the field again until that same day next week. And I would have 6 days off, unless you come on for a relief outing, maybe. But most likely, if you're a starter, you pitch once a week. And that is a result of you can't pitch those other days because your muscles are so fatigued, which in a training environment looks like, while you see your, teammates that are hitters, your other teammates going and training really hard and facing, really difficult practice environments where they're setting up a machine and seeing fastballs coming in 90 plus miles an hour every single day and feeling like they're getting better. Pitching is really unique, and it's very difficult to have those kind of concrete training days where you're like, man, I really got better today. And so I think like you were saying, setting a goal for yourself and achieving it in a training environment as a pitcher is a very important thing to do, but it's very difficult. And I'll go a little bit more into that because I don't know if I explained it as well as I hope to. I think like I want to communicate the fact that as a pitcher, it's very difficult to mimic your performance environment. And so that means it's very difficult to build confidence because you haven't seen a performance environment. And so, like right now after the season ended, I've taken the last couple of weeks off of throwing just for my arm health. And that means the same amount of weeks I took off throwing, twice as many weeks it'll take me to ramp back up before I'm able to throw at a high intensity. And even then, it'll be a few more weeks before I can, face batters or do live at bats, which means essentially do what I'm going to be required to do in a game. And so that kind of like restriction on my training environment, excuse me, means that the goals that I set for myself today, the goals that I set for myself tomorrow, are usually like in the weight room or in, or are related to mobility or related to mindset. And so for me, I find a lot of enjoyment in the training process. And that training process is in the weight room, on a yoga mat, on, in a dark room, my eyes closed, going through a visualization of a game, all these different things that, to an outsider looking in, say this is not pitching training. Like you're back squatting. What does that have to do with, your fastball? I think all these things that are adjacent to pitching and are the small things that contribute to being a good athlete are the things that I really find enjoyment in, and I think are things that you really need to find enjoyment in order to be a successful pitcher. So Dan, like you were talking about having a goal that you crush and that brings you happiness. I find a lot of pitchers, a lot of really successful pitchers, find just as much enjoyment, if not more, in the process of getting better and the training environment than they do in a performance environment, which is, I think, very counterintuitive to a lot of people. Because if I was on a basketball team, I think the best way to train is, obviously you have your technical work and, you're 100 free throws or whatever it may be, but it's probably going and playing pickup. And it's probably going and playing in an environment that closely resembles what you're going to be required to do in a game. But I think for pitching, being able to find enjoyment and value and fulfillment in crushing, a lower body workout in June when your game is not going to, when your, most important game is not going to be until the following May is a very difficult thing to do for a lot of people. And so that's where people kind of, I think a lot of personal development is left off the table. As you say, well, this isn't really going to help my development. How is this going to make me a better pitcher? And so they take it less seriously than they should. But yeah, to your point, I think just like being able to set a goal for yourself and find fulfillment in the process of getting better is far more important than enjoying playing well in the springtime, because that's almost the reward for all the hard work is being able to compete.
Right. And to your point, right, going about those different efforts and endeavors on the day to day that set you up for success later on, you don't get to experience that success until later, right? It's not like an immediate instant gratification. It takes time to get there, right? If you're throwing 80-mile-an-hour fastball and you want to get to 90, it takes a lot of time and work and sweat equity to get there. It's these belief and effort towards things in which the goal or outcome has not yet been seen. And it's very, very difficult to do. And one of the many examples I continue to go back to describe it is the myth of Sisyphus, right? You feel like you're doing this eternal task of pushing a rock up a mountain, and you're just wondering if it's ever going to get there, if it's ever going to stick. And what I think takes, again, going back to the word maturing, it takes maturing to realize that instead of the destination of, getting that, getting the rock to the top of the metaphorical mountain or getting that outcome of a 90-mile-an-hour goal, it's not just achieving the goal that makes me feel good, but it's the process of getting there. And that's something that I don't think we realize, or I certainly don't realize it myself until it's actually been done, right? It's not the goal itself that is like the driving factor of you becoming stronger and becoming better and developing all around and teaching you all these lessons. It's the work that you put in to get to the achievement of that goal that makes you so successful and teaches you so much about life and lessons and so on that way, right? One of the many things I like to talk about is how athletes seem to have wisdom beyond their years. And I think part of it is just the amount of lessons you learn from sport and training and discipline and so on that way that you don't get in any other setting, in any other environment. And again, it's that same process of everything I just outlined. You putting in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy for a goal. And then once you achieve the goal, you realize it's not just the goal that makes you feel good, but the fact that you put in so much effort and so much energy and so much work. And again, that relentless pursuit of getting there that makes you feel good. It's not getting to the top of the mountain. It's not being at the top of the mountain, I should say, that makes you stronger. It's the process of pushing the rock up the hill to get there that makes you stronger and makes you more resilient as a person that way. And again, the trials and tribulations you face along that journey are the things that make you just so robust for any aspect of life and anything that life throws at you. I know we haven't necessarily talked about what the future holds for you yet, but knowing that you're a comp sci major and knowing that you come from a family of entrepreneurs, like I know that you're going to face a lot of difficult times. You're going to have a lot of long days and hard hours ahead of you, but you've put in so much work so far that you kind of look at it and you're like, you know what, I've come this far. Like I can still succeed. Like, yes, there's going to be challenges, but the things that I learned from sport are going to springboard me towards success in the comp sci profession and in entrepreneurship because I've taken the time, I've reflected, I've done all the things that I need to do. I've learned so many lessons that now when I go into business, when I go into comp sci, when I go into whatever, it's almost like easy in comparison, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to connect that back to what we were talking about earlier, oftentimes the result is out of your control. And so if somebody's goal, somebody will say, okay, I want to be, first team all conference. It's like, well, as a pitcher, that's very difficult to do if you have one bad outing. And that one bad outing could be the wind's blowing out that day and your outfielder was positioned poorly and you're facing a good team and you execute your pitch, but you had a bad day and you could do everything right and have a bad day. And then that goal you set for yourself is no longer attainable. And I think that's a lot of things. When somebody asks me, how hard do you want to throw? What do you want your ERA to be? What do you want to be? These specific things. And it's a little different for those two metrics because your ERA is dependent on other people and environment, and your fastball velocity is less dependent on other people. But I treat them the same way in that those are simply the end goal, and I really have no control over that. I have control over what I do today to get me there. And that's something our strength coach, who I've worked really closely with and has done a phenomenal job my 3 years, has talked about is a process oriented goal. What is your process goal? And so at the beginning of the spring, or maybe it's the fall, or whatever it may be, we all fill out a spreadsheet and we write in a goal. And so some people will say, I want to throw 90 miles an hour. I want to hit 10 home runs, whatever it may be. But then next to that, you have to write down two process goals. And so maybe like for me, mine this year were, get 8.5 hours of sleep on average, or whatever it may be. But like that's something I can do every single day, and that's something I have much more control over than my ERA. And the other one may be like critically reassessing the intensity and focus that I'm working out with every week. Like every Sunday, write down, in baseball, school, and your, personal life, are you focused on the things that matter? Are you doing those things with enough intensity? And so really hyper focusing on those things that matter and those things that you can really control every single day has, at least in my experience, led to much greater results than if I were to just set a result and then try to like get there just for the sake of getting to that result. And so somebody asked me how hard I want to throw, instead of saying something that makes sense, I say like 105, like why not? And like I'm 5'11" and a half. Like I'm not going to be throwing 100 anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that day-to-day life should not reflect me trying to throw 100 miles an hour. And so that for me has been a big thing. It's just like focusing on the day-to-day, the small steps. And that I think translates extremely well, like you were saying, to the, I don't want to, real world everybody talks about. But I think that very much, I know that very much translates to the classroom, that very much translates to professional life. So like, for example, my freshman year, when I first started working with our mental skills coach and was starting to put together these like aha moments of pitching is very much the things you can control are separate from the result. And so I had just taken my first math class, and my first collegiate math class. I was taking like multivariable calculus, and I did not do very well in the first exam, and got the exam back. Man, this sucks. And my mind immediately went to like, am I cut out for this? I know this is a prerequisite for other classes I need. Is this like the right track? Should I be doing something totally differently? As if I wasn't worthy of being in that class or doing well in it. And then I very much looked at it from a baseball perspective. And I looked at it from, okay, well, I just got hit around in the first inning. I just gave up two, three, four runs in the first inning. It's like, that doesn't mean we can't win the game. That doesn't mean that you can't go out and put up a zero in the second inning. And so for me, that looked like, well, what did I do to study for that exam? It's like, did I study the right things? Did I study the right amount? Did I go to the office hours? Did I do these extra things that are much more tangible than the grade I get on an exam? Because maybe the professor puts a hard question on the exam, or you didn't get enough sleep, or whatever it may be. How you do on an exam is a reflection of how you feel and do in that hour and a half. Whereas the day-to-day work that I could do is much more under my control. And I did much better on the next exams, and I got an A in the class because I was able to really focus on the things that I was able to do every single day, rather than saying I want X grade on the next exam. And that's the same, and that is a direct result of going out in my freshman year. And I got hit around a lot my freshman year, going out, giving up 5 runs in the first inning, your offense surges back and then you get a win for the game somehow. So I think, like you were saying, those lessons I've learned from baseball have already directly translated to my academics, and I'm sure will continue to kind of be my foundation of my mental process into the professional world.
Absolutely. I love that. And again, it's having that process in place. And part of that process is being, again, honest with yourself about what happens, what you can do about it, and just aware of the situation. Is just overall, yes, this is the outcome I got, but there's so many different factors and variables that can influence that, right? And I think one of the many things we have a tendency to do as people is we initially blame ourselves for everything. And yeah, again, some of it can be our fault, but there's also so many external factors that can play into it as well. As you mentioned before, controlling the controllables, right? It's understanding, what kind of things can I control going into this, right? If it's baseball, if it's a real terrible weather day, like obviously you're not going to change the freaking weather. Like all of a sudden we can't take it from 50 and rainy to 75 and sunny. Like there's things that are out of our control, and understanding where you can control things. But also, the other thing I want to emphasize is just how serious you take everything that you do as well, not just sport, but the academic side of things as well. Like you're a freaking academic weapon out here. And that's something I think separates good from great athletes. Is there are athletes that are very, very gifted and talented. However, they don't take the gift and the talent and the work ethic to anything outside of sport. They don't take it to, their academics. They don't take it to their relationships with other people, whatever it is that way. They're very much all about the sport. And I think in order to really truly embody the spirit of what it means to be an athlete, you have to take that same level of commitment to other things in life, not just your sport, but everything else, right? When I was growing up watching baseball, one of the many names that I still remember to this day was Derek Jeter, right? Like I remember watching the games, watching him on the field, the post-game press conferences. But one of the many things that amazed me about Derek Jeter is not just his on-field performance, but the way he talked with people, the wording he used. And you just never heard him say a bad thing about other people. And maybe he did and I missed it, but it's just that process of just like having everything locked in and dialed in all aspects of life, and being serious about all aspects of life and not just your overall performance on field or in game that way, because all those other things do trickle over to that eventually one way or another. And again, one of the many things I find interesting about, people is we have a tendency to idolize athletes. We look up to athletes. We consider them almost to be like hero type persona, if you will. And it's like if we're looking up to them because of what they do in sport or on field, then I also like to ensure that the people we're looking up to have those other areas of life kind of locked in as well that way, making sure they're good role models for other individuals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, the way I approach baseball is very much the way I approach other things in a good way, but that also means that I need to do the same critical assessments that I do with my base, like the same honest critical assessments I do with myself after a bad outing, after a bad exam, or in a lot of other areas of my life. Or, for example, I was a captain my this past year, and there's a lot to learn there, that I need to approach the same way I approach baseball, because if you want your team to play well, having strong leadership is very important, but that is a very different thing than simply leading by example. I think some people use as an excuse to not be a great leader, right? Like, lead by example means do the right thing. Absolutely. You should be doing the right thing, and you're probably elected captain because you've been doing the right thing. But that doesn't mean that you're exempt from learning how to be a better leader and reach out to people and try to connect with people that, approach things very differently than you. And so if I just say, oh, I'm going to lead by example, and not really take the time to see how what I do doesn't work for other people, and how I have a lot of room to grow as a leader, especially for those that approach things very differently from me, I think that is an area that I need to do. I need to apply that same, you know, baseball pitching style, critical and kind of like brutally honest reassessment of more like consistently. And so that's the same thing as, like I was mentioning with that math test, and it's the same thing in relationships, and it's the same thing during a job interview that doesn't go the way you want it to. But it's sometimes it's a little bit more difficult because you're so ingrained in doing that in athletics, and it's very easy to kind of differentiate athletics from kind of your own ego and your own thought processes. So that's definitely been something that I've appreciated having that experience from baseball for.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I love that. And the other thing I did want to touch on real quick is the role of support in this process, as well as obviously you've talked about the support of your team, your coaching staff, performance, and so on that way. But I'd imagine your family played such a crucial role in your support just to get to this process, get to this point in your life in the first place, but also continue to help you develop and just act as whether that be a sounding board or support or just being at your games and being present there that way. I'm interested to hear more about kind of the role that your family played in getting you to this point and obviously helping you continue to succeed that way.
No, I mean it's difficult to talk about because I'll never be able to do it justice. I mean my family is the reason that I am who I am, and I mean all the success that I've had I attribute to who I am, and therefore I attribute to my parents that raised me and my brother and sister that kind of shaped me through my formative years. So I know you already talked to my sister and had her on here, but I mean I can't describe her as anything other than a force of nature. I mean if she wants to get something done, she does it, and I've never seen her walk down a predefined path. She's always like weed whacking her way through the forest, making her own path. So just and I've been able to work with her a little bit on her business, which for those that don't know, she does like social media consulting services, and so she recently started her own media agency, created an online social media 101 course for people that want to use social media to develop their small business, or that want to be influencers or content creators, and how to monetize social media, how to use different platforms, kind of like a crash course into the things that she's learned over her ton of effort and time the last really decade. And she recruited me to help build this course and kind of like outline it and help engineer it essentially. And so that was really rewarding being able to work with her because we have pretty opposing skill sets. She's a force of nature, is going to get stuff done, a week before the deadline and move on to the next thing. And I'm much more detail oriented and kind of meticulous and things. And so being able to work with her has been great. And I say that as from a business perspective, it's been great. But I mean, just growing up with her my whole life has been very formative in the way she approaches things, as never taking no for an answer. My brother as well. I'm sure you'll have him on at one point or another. He's senior lacrosse and basketball player in high school. He's committed to Hamilton College for lacrosse next year, and as a sophomore, he led his lacrosse team to states as a fogo, so a specialist, almost like a pitcher. But he as well. He started his own. So I'll back a little bit. He has a celiac disease, so he's gluten free, which means most of the pastries you buy in stores, most of the breads, most of the cookies, most of the cupcakes that you buy in stores suck because being gluten free doesn't sound like a lot of fun, and it's not easy for those things to be mass produced. And so he very much took it upon himself to make better gluten free cookies and started his own cookie business. And he's extremely smart. I mean, he obviously has the athletic ability and the athletic performance that kind of supports the fact that he's very smart and intelligent in what he does. But I mean, my favorite story of his is he was trying to get these cookies, which he originally sold by bringing them into school in a big duffel bag, and would sell out by second period. All these people coming up to him, giving like, and then there was a whole resale market of these cookies at school. I was out of high school by then, but yeah, I heard it was a crazy time. But he was trying to get them into our concession stand at school. And so, the PTSA wouldn't take it for whatever bogus reason. And they're like, no, we're not going to do it. We can't do this. We can't do that. And he wasn't buying it. So he went to our rival high school and presented it to them. And the rival high school took the cookies. And, he didn't have the same name over there. So they weren't selling all that well. But he went back to our high school and was like, hey, our rival high school is selling my cookies. And they're like, well, all right, we can make something work. So got him into our high school, and then no longer sells them at the rival high school. So that kind of thing of not taking no for an answer is another example of the three of us being a product of my mom and dad, who have been, I mean, the reason the three of us are the way we are is because of them. My both my parents work extremely hard, in their own respective ways and have been extremely formative of us. But then obviously the time commitment that comes with having three busy kids drive my mom specifically driving us around to practices and playing catch with us when we were really little has obviously been extremely formative. But I think in the less obvious ways of just them being themselves has very much translated into my brother, sister, and I being ourselves in a similar way and kind of unapologetically being ourselves and not necessarily, going with the flow and not necessarily conforming to the places that we're in.
Life is too short to do that. It's way too short to do that. It's way too short to end up in situations that you feel stuck in and that, you're just not fulfilled. And as you just kind of mentioned, you can always find a way forward. It's just a matter of how much work are you willing to do and are you willing to look in places that no one else is. So I absolutely love that you've had those forces around you this entire time. And obviously, you're able to continue to build on that moving forward in your future career and endeavors that way, Sam. I feel like we could probably talk all day long because I mean, this is just such a natural conversation for both of us, I think. Is there anything that we missed or anything else you want to discuss that we haven't had the opportunity to do so today?
I was just going to touch on. I know we spent a lot of time with the mental side of baseball as well, and so I just want to quickly touch on the physical development and how that very much is almost the prerequisite for all the mental stuff that we've talked about. I know like I talked about kind of getting the most out of where you throw a pitch and how hard you throw it, but a lot of the physical development has very much followed the same track, and kind of like critically reassessing where you are. That's been a huge component as well. But yeah, I think the physical component very much is the foundation for the mental component, and that's been true the last couple of years. But no, I think all the things we talked about have been really good. But no, there's been a lot of fun.
Sam, for people who want to find out more about you, maybe find you on social media or follow the baseball team that way, where can they find you all at?
Sure. So Haverford has a athletics page, Haverford Athletics, and then there you can navigate to the baseball tab and learn more about that. My Instagram is Sam_C_18, and then yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and see everything that Sam and his team are up to. You mean to tell me you haven't made it viral on TikTok yet, Sam?
No, I part of my process goals have been kind of removing myself from social media. So I found a lot of value in kind of trying not to find myself doom scrolling, however, for too long. But no, I try to stay off TikTok.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link to all that in the description below. Again, Sam, this was really awesome, dude. I really appreciate your time and love all the things you've been up to, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.